Lock her up. Justice for Hillary, finally. For those of you who haven't been following the news, a new development has appeared to happen, which is that Sessions, the Attorney General, may name a special counsel to investigate Hillary. Finally. I hope it happens. Let's see. The two things that are on the table right now are the Uranium One deal, which is where the United States gave Russia control of 20% of our uranium. It was approved by Hillary, and coincidentally, Hillary's organization, charitable organization, received $145 million, and Bill Clinton's speaking fees went up. He got $500,000 in Russia for a speech. That's something that raises eyebrows and should be investigated. It looks like pay for play. It looks like a quid pro quo. But anyway, that's one thing. And the other is the famous Russian collusion issue, but this time with Hillary. What an irony. They start investigating Trump and end up finding evidence against Hillary for Russian collusion. Now, what happened with Hillary? Well, she hired through an attorney, pretty sneaky, a organization called Fusion GPS, which specializes in smearing people, creating evidence against opponents that is false, or intimidating witnesses by creating false evidence and ruining their reputation. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that, about why these organizations like GPS can get away with smearing people. Well, and the gist of it is this. It used to be that when you libel somebody, that meant that you said something false and they could recuperate damages. But if the person is a public servant, based on the New York Times piece, you have to prove a whole bunch of other stuff. The standard is very high. Gross negligence, that you could have found out that you did it on purpose, etc. And therefore, public officials or people in the public are fair game and to get smeared. So in this case, they're violating the principle of the truth. A very slick lawyer persuaded the Supreme Court to take on this new doctrine, which is total nonsense. They should have continued with the British idea that it's very simple. If you lie, you're responsible. It's all about the truth. Anyway, that's a digression. GPS, what did they do? Well, they hired a foreign spy, Steele, from Britain. And what happened? He went to Russia and paid the Russians, those bad people, those Russians, money to get salacious material on Trump, just the way the Fusion GPS does with everybody else. And then they leaked it to the press, and they got it to the FBI. And the FBI's participation is not completely clear, whether they, how they cooperated. But they got it to the FBI. I think it was McCain who they duped by giving him the dossier, and then he just promptly sent it over to the FBI. Anyway, smearing candidates is a very dirty tactic, and one we got to get rid of, and there has to be penalties. But so far, there are no penalties. What happened there afterwards? Well, the FBI apparently used this material to get a FISA warrant, to get a warrant to survey Trump. So if all of this Trump collusion investigation by the special counsel is based on a dossier, which is fake news, salacious, false allegations, then the whole premise for the investigation is faulty and should be dismissed. On the other hand, there's plenty of evidence that Hillary Clinton did pay GPS Fusion to get this information, and that is colluding with the Russians to affect the elections. The thing that everybody is talking about and they hate Trump for, the irony is apparently Hillary is the one who is guilty of it. Now, what else should they be, once they start investigating Hillary, well, there's a whole laundry list of things, of criminal violations. Just to start out with, obstruction of justice. She was subpoenaed to produce emails, and what did she do? She destroyed them. Now, if in a justice system you cannot get hold of the documents that are necessary to prove the guilt or innocence of a party, because even after a court orders you to present the documents, you can destroy them, well, you can't get to justice. And that's a problem. That's a fundamental problem that you cannot tolerate in a system. Of course, she also had gross negligence and in her handling of classified materials and other things like that. There's a whole litany of technical violations that she committed. Well, the whole point here is it's equal justice for all. And if Hillary committed violations, she has to be prosecuted just like anybody else. Now, lawlessness by the government, which is what happened here, is the worst kind of lawlessness there is. It's much worse than the lawlessness by a private individual. That's why Nixon had to resign for a burglary that he financed. Now, this ends up being even worse than what Nixon did, because if you can corrupt the government and use the FBI to surveil your opponents and get dirt on them, spy on them, then our system is totally corrupt. Whoever has the power of government can use it against political opponents, and that will destroy the system. That's a third world country corrupt government, and that's not what we're supposed to be. Not a limited government, constitutionally based, in which the government's enforcement powers are not used for political ends, like happened with the IRS under Obama and everything else that you may or may not know. So this is really bad. A good interview that I did to show the terrible consequences of government lawlessness is the one I did with Bruce Fine. He's a constitutional scholar, and he explains very well why government lawlessness is the worst. Now, the people in the government complained a lot about Snowden, about what he did was illegal. Of course, they said it was a good thing he did it because it brought the issue to the attention of the public, but then they didn't want to share their salaries with him for doing their job. Anyway, so they complain a lot about Snowden. Now, what Snowden did was technically illegal, but he was doing society a service, and they want to put him in jail. On the other hand, the government officials who use the government corruptly to, in this case, organize surveillance against their political opponents, Trump and his associates. And by the way, the FBI investigated those Trump associates and Trump for a year, and now the special counsel has investigated him for 6 months. What have they come up with? Nothing that proves that Trump colluded with the Russians to affect the election, only that some of his associates were shady and they were trying to make money on the side. And so what? That has nothing to do with Trump colluding with the Russians to affect the election, which was the whole original allegation. So what's at stake here? What is at stake is the value of justice. Justice is to treat people as they deserved. In this case, justice is what has to be done, because justice is a basic value in our society. If people aren't treated as they deserve, the guilty going to jail, the innocent being free, truth prevailing over lies and smears, people being held liable for lying and for smearing other people, if that goes by the wayside, we're sunk. This is like total corruption. So this is a fundamental issue and a fundamental question that we need to address, and I hope it is finally being addressed. Now, I think Sessions is going to appear before Congress, and I'm sure they'll be asking him questions like this, whether he's going to name this special counsel, but I certainly hope so. And I would really like to hear your views about this. I think it's completely ironic that a investigation that started off to prove Trump's collusion with the Russians ends up leading to surface Hillary's collusion with the Russians, and apparently with a lot more evidence. Let me know what you all think. Thank you.